Word codes. So in this question type, you'll receive 4 words and 3 codes. So if we have a look at what they're talking about in this example, where are the 4 words? You can see them over here. Where are the 3 codes? You can see them over here. Okay, with no specific order. So these are in no specific order. Each code corresponds to 1 word. Alright, so again, we know that this is what they mean by the codes, and this is what they mean by the words. So one of these codes is linked to one of these words, is what they're saying here. Corresponds to 1 word, and 1 word remains unpaired. So what does it mean by unpaired? Well, basically all of these, one of these are like linked, probably something like this. And then, for example, trip might have no code for it at the moment. That's what they mean by unpaired. It doesn't have a code linked to it. What does it say next? Your task is to either match a code to a given word, so we're either going to have to figure out what the code is for trip, or identify a word from a given code. So what they might do is they might give you a code, a new code, like 3876 or something, and say, what does this word spell out? And you have to figure it out using this information only. So how do you do that? We can see that in this example just now. What it's done here, how you figure this out, is you look first for the similar numbers. So you can see there's 1, 1, and 1, and 1. And obviously the 1 is going to mean the same letter in each of these. Okay, so if the 1 is equal to, for example, P, then we need a word that has P at the front and P at the end. You can see none of these actually have that, so it can't be P. What you can see though is one of these words, test, has a T on both the start and the end. That means these two are linked, because basically it's the only one that would work, the only code that would work for test. So that's what they've done here. They figured out that the code for test is 1851. And actually from that you know the code for E is 8 and the code for S is 5, as you can see here. So any of these other ones, for example, if they use the letter S, for example 5 here, past, you know the number here is going to be 5. So is there any of these codes that have the number 5? No. In that position, no, apart from the one that we already used. And that's what they've done here actually. They've filled them in here. So you can see we know the code for past is going to end in 5-1, because we know what T is, we know what S is, right? And actually what it continues on to do after that is figure out, what did it say here? The number 4 is in position 2. Okay, so it's trying to figure out what 4 is equal to. So if 4 is here and here, well, what letter is in the 2nd position and the 3rd position in one of these words? Let's have a look. I can see it right here. So R is in the 2nd position and it's in the 3rd position in this word. So that way we know actually trip is this and this is port. And there we go, we've actually linked up and figured out a lot of the letters just from that. So we know R is equal to 4, we know T is already 1, we already knew that, and we know 6 and 2, so we know P is equal to 2, and we already knew that from here as well. We know O is 7, and we know T is 1, we already knew that. And actually we've got a lot of these now, so we know S is equal to, what was it, 5, we know P is equal to 2, we know R is equal to 4. From that we can actually figure out quite a lot of things, so let's have a look at what the actual question wants us to do. Now we know the letter from each number represents. We can answer any further questions. So here's the question. It says, what is the code for past? Well, we can use it from here. We know P is 2. We know A from here. Actually, we don't have an A. We've never figured out what A is. Well, we know what S is. We know S is 5. And we know T is 1. So we know it's going to be 2 something, 5, 1. So let's just rub that out. We are now left with A, as all the other numbers are used, only 3 remains. 3 represents A. So this is a type of question. I think this is a difficult one. This is unlikely to come up, but what it's asking you to do here is basically, you've never been given anywhere from this information what A might equal. But what they've done here is they've figured out, this is just using numbers from 1 to 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it hasn't used 3, meaning 3 must equal A, and that's why they've done past to equal 2, 3, 5, 1. If we look at the other 2 questions that they've given us, sprite, what does 5, 2, 4, 6, 8, 6, 1, 8 mean? We could figure that out from our own one. We already know 5 is S, 2 is P, 4 is R, what was 6? 6 was I, yep, 6 was I, 1 was T, and 8 was E, as you can see here. That's how they got to sprite from this, and they'll do this exact same thing with this. Basically, once you figured out most of these, you can figure out the rest, and that's sort of what they do. They'll give you one of these types of questions. You can see in the instructions that they said either it will ask you to match a code to a given word, which is here. So match a code to a given word. Match a code, meaning to a given word is passed, and this is the code that you have to match to. Or they will identify a word from a given code. This is a given code, this is a word. And those are the 2 types of questions that they'll give you, and you'll see in this practice now section that, yeah, these are the only 2 types of questions. So I'm going to quickly go through 2 or 3 of these questions, and then I'll leave the rest to you. But let's go through and figure this out. So when we start this off like we did at the start, always look for one of the letters, or look at the words and see which letters have been repeated. So you can see W is used twice, meaning if there's a code in here that both of the codes start with the same number, then we can pretty much figure out like what W stands for. And you can see both of these have 2. That means they are linked to each other some way. We don't know which way, but we know 2 is equal to W. Now let's look at O, because you can see O is in the second position in a lot of these actually. And what's in the second position in both of these? 7. Alright. So that means O is going to equal 7. And you can also see actually that 8 is in the second position in this code. And obviously it's not going to be O, because 7 is O. What's 8 going to be? The only other thing it can be is A, because this is the only other letter in the second position. So 8 is equal to A. And from that we actually know that obviously 2831 is Ward. And that's given us a ton of information. We know 2 is equal to W, we know 3 is equal to A, we know 8 is equal to R, we know 1 equal to D, and we can actually figure out what the answer to this question is just from that. And you can see it's actually backwards, but yeah, 1, so D is 1, R is 8, A is 3, and W is 2, and that's our code for draw. We've just figured it out just from figuring out which code is actually linked to Ward. And now let's do, what does 672831 mean? Well, we know what 8 means. We know 8 is A. We know 2 is W. So what was that? W. We know what 7 means. 7 is O. And do we know what 3 means? We do actually. 3 is A. We've already done that, I think. 3 is R, sorry. R. We know what 1 is, D. So there we go, we've actually figured out all of this. We don't know what 6 is just yet, but we've got Award. I would assume something like coward would go here, because that's the only one that would make sense. So that means it will be C. But let's just have a look. Is there any way to figure out what 6 is equal to? Well, we know 7 is O, and we know 3 is R. We know 1 is D. So this is a code for chord, right? anything in this list is going to be linked to one of the ones above, and this has to be called, meaning 6 has to be C, meaning this is coward. Hopefully that made sense. I'm going to go through 2 more questions and let you do the last 2. So what is the code for male if we look at this? Again, best thing to do to start off with is just look at what letters have been repeated. So these 2 have G, these 2 have L. Actually, because there's 2 and 2, it's not going to be useful, not very helpful. So the 4 here can either be G or it can be L, we can't tell. Let's look at something different. Let's look at the double L here. Is there any of these codes that have a double number? And you can see here actually 22, right? Meaning this code has 2 of the same letters next to each other at the end, and it has to be, therefore it has to be Gil, because there's no other word here that has 2 of the same letters next to each other at the end. So that's given us a lot of information already. We know what I is, we know what G is. Let's figure out what the rest is. Well, this has to be another word that starts with G, meaning this has to be gaze. And actually from that we might be able to figure out what this word is. Well, we know A is 5, we know L is 2, we know E is 1. We just have to figure out what M is. So is this going to be lazy or is this going to be lame? Let's have a look. Well, we know it starts with L, we know 5 is A, and we know 1 is E, sorry. Meaning this is going to have to be lame, and 6 is therefore M. So we can put this in. That means 6521. That's our answer for male. And can we decode this one now? 42156. Well, we know 4 is G from here. You can see here. So 4 is G. We know 2 is L. We know 1 is E. We know 5 is A. And we know 6 is M. So gleam, that's our word. And that's how you can do this very quickly. Let's do question 3. Again, actually, the first thing I notice here is there is a double letter in the same word. So if there's any code that starts and ends with the same number, it's going to have to be tent. So we've linked these 2 already. So tent, T-E-N-T, meaning E is equal to 1, 7 is equal to N, and obviously 2 is T. Can we actually figure out what this code is just from that? Well, we can figure out what the last 3 letters are going to be. It's going to be 1, 7 and 2, because we've got ent here. We need to know what S is before we can finish that first section of the question. Let's have a look. Well, we know that T is 2, and the only other word here with T is tune. So these are going to be linked. So it's going to be NE. It's going to be tune. And N is 7. So this is going to be nest. And from that we figured out what S is. S is equal to 9. If we put that in there, 9172. If this is going too fast, just rewatch this video. It might be helpful. Rewatch it a few times if it's still not making sense, and try and follow my mouse cursor as well. Okay, what does 9237 mean? We know 9 is equal to 7 because it says sent. So 9, sorry, starts with S, right? 9. This is going to be S. What does 2 equal? We know that it equals to 10. T, sorry. 2 is equal to T. You can see that here. These 2. What is 3 equal to? Well, 3 is U. What is 7 equal to? 7 is N. So stun. And there you go. And you're practically, actually, you're probably doing these this is 2 questions, and we're doing that in maybe under a minute or around 1 or 2 minutes. So if we're fast, obviously we can do this even quicker. But this is a perfect speed to be going at. And if you leave the answers for question 4 and question 5 in the comments, I will pin whoever gets them right. Hopefully that was useful. Look for patterns and connections between the codes and the words, in the word codes. Right, that's perfect.